Us for our second digital strategy chat. We're discussing metadata today. David,
So thank you. Let me just we do our little introductions first. So this is our digital strategy chat brought to you by Denverdata Web. That's the company that me and Sarah was with. We are a digital strategy company, so we help our clients, achieve their unique objectives, utilizing a goal-focused approach to web development, web design, digital marketing, all those things. And we're really excited to talk about metadata today because there's actually a lot in that that can impact SEO. It's really great stuff. Now, my name is David Zonka. I'm a digital strategist here with Denverdata Web, and we have Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Joswiak. I am the digital marketing analyst at Denverdata Web.
So let's dive right into this because there are so many different things we could talk about with metadata, and I want to make sure we can cover all the different pieces. Like metadata, it sounds kind of dry, it sounds very technical, but it's really pervasive across many aspects of SEO. So why don't we kind of dive in really what we mean when we talk about what metadata is? There's probably some people out there who aren't even familiar with that.
Yeah, the good news is it's for the most part common sense. It is informational data about every web page on a site. It provides information not only to search engine users but also to Google. So it comes into play mainly for search engine results pages, but there are other things that it can work with, especially letting Google know which pages on your site are good for which different topics.
It's pretty important.
Yeah, and it can be, the good news is you can specialize it and customize it on your own. You can write it custom, or if you don't have time for that, Google can also take what is on the page and create metadata based on what people are searching.
I like how Google's always trying to help, I know that Google took off their "Don't be evil" bit off their company motto and stuff like that some time ago. I don't know if that necessarily means they're now evil. Maybe they just didn't want to be held to that standard anymore. Probably legal reasons, but they're always helping. They're always trying to help people find what they're looking for. That's really, I think, the main reason for existence for Google. So I like how they're consistent with that. But when it comes to Google, when I think of metadata and keywords and tags and things like that, when I look back years ago, the early days of SEO, things like keyword stuffing into meta tags and putting all your keywords in there, that was the way you did SEO back then, right? I mean, I can't put a date on that, but years ago that's how it was. You'd have all these tags and you'd put in the keywords and stuff, and it worked until Google figured out, wow, this isn't a great user experience. They're kind of circumventing how we want the algorithm to work. And then it kind of cracked down on that, right? But I mean, that didn't mean that was the end of using meta tags then.
No, not at all. Meta tags are still very, very useful. And anyone who's ever searched anything on Google can see easily that the meta tags and the meta descriptions, they tell you about what's going to be on a page before you get there. And absolutely, years ago, that you used to be able to stuff it and just write the same word over and over and over again. I remember, and I always use pizza as an example because it's something everyone knows what it is. You would search,
oh, I do,
pizza delivery Denver, and you would find pages that would just, the whole thing would be pizza, 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 pizza. And that's not helpful. That doesn't tell us what's on the page. But at the same time, those pages used to be able to be the first one on there just because it was so optimized in that direction. It wasn't very well optimized though. Google has definitely cracked down not only on not stuffing keywords, but then also focusing on readability. So if your page content is readable and understandable and uses the words people are searching for in a well-written way, so to speak, there's a much better chance that not only your metadata but your page in general is going to do a lot better.
Yeah, when you said pizza, 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 it made me think of Little Caesars, to be honest. So now
Yes.
I really want some pizza. We're getting close
They
to
might have
lunchtime.
been able to get away with it because that's their motto, so it's probably all over their site. And also that's another thing that's an interesting point because if if what you're writing in your metadata doesn't match what's on your page, there's also a higher chance that Google is going to reject that metadata and use what's on
Mm.
your page instead. So Little Caesars may have been able to get away with that, but yeah, it's interesting.
I think that really speaks to kind of the evolution of how Google has changed their algorithms and what they're trying to accomplish with this giant search juggernaut that they've built. I mean, when we talk about search engines, we really just mean Google. But Bing, you're out there. We hear you. We use Bing too. In advertising stuff. It has a place. It's very important. But back to Google. I mean, as I've followed some of this, it seems like they've really harped on in recent years user experience for searchers and the user as it is. And when you're stuffing all those keywords and you're putting all these things that may not be very directly relevant, that's a bad user experience, isn't it? You're looking
Mhm.
for something, hey, maybe this page will have what I want, and you get there and it's completely unrelated or it's off base and nobody's happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the many poor practices that Google has cracked down on. In the same realm, you can go the opposite direction and not optimize well enough, which doesn't exactly create a poor user experience, but it may not let the Google user know that your page is where they should be, where they're. It may not let the Google user know that your page is appropriate for their search.
Hmm.
So, in the same idea that keyword stuffing is one extreme. You also want to make sure that when you're writing custom metadata, that it is descriptive and it is optimized, um, and make sure that those keywords are getting in there. Absolutely.
Yeah, you can do enough, or you could do too much. It's a delicate balance, I imagine, right? I mean, there's probably a variety of things. That people just probably aren't doing right. Keyword stuffing is an old thing that definitely shouldn't be doing anymore still, and hopefully nobody's still trying to do that. Um, Not doing enough to optimize. Are there any kind of things that people might not be doing well with their metadata to really get it working right?
What I see a lot of the time is people, and I don't know if this is necessarily Google taking this information or people doing this. I know that um, some people I've worked with in the past have actually just copied and pasted the first line of content on the page. And while that is better than nothing, it doesn't always provide all those optimized terms that you want to use. So again, going back to, you want to make sure that your metadata is optimized, both your keyword, but both your title tag and your meta description. Um, you want to make sure that you're saying enough about the page, but that you're not necessarily going off topic. I've also seen a few times, I've also seen often meta descriptions talking about things that are a little too bit specific for the page. Going to the keyword example, if the theme of your page is thin crust pizza, you don't necessarily want to go too much in description about like pepperoni pizza or different toppings, just because the characters are so limited. So you do want to stay on topic for the page. You want to say enough about the page so that people understand what's there, but you don't want to get too descriptive or just say too much too quickly. Another thing that you used to see more often, but this does go along with the readability, your meta description, especially the two short sentences in the description, you want to make sure that those are full sentences and not fragments. We mentioned in the past you used to be able to just write a bunch of keywords in there and Google would
Yeah.
accept it. But like I mentioned earlier, Google has been focusing on readability. So that's something that you want to make sure it's readable sentences, well-written sentences, but then also using your keywords. So finding that delicate balance between those two. And then in addition, the title tag at the top is very, very short. You get, it's counted by pixels, but in general, you get about 55 to 65 characters within that title tag. So you don't want to have those those filler words in there. So you don't want to make that a sentence. You do want to make that very fragmented, just because it is so limited, and it's also the first place people's eyes go. So people are going to skip over words like of or the. So you do want to make that very, very short and simple and to the point. Keyword, geo modifier, maybe a pipe character, and then another keyword after that, and leave it at that.
Gotcha.
Company
So filler
name.
words, want to be light on those. You mentioned a geo modifier. I imagine that has something to do with where geography comes into play with what you're writing about. Am I right?
That is exactly what that is. Going back to my pizza example, if you are a pizzeria, I live in Lakewood. So if you're a pizzeria in the Lakewood area, you don't want to have the word Denver in there exactly, just because people in Denver probably want to get pizza closer to their home. So you would have Lakewood Pizzeria pipe character, going back to the thin crust pizza thing. Lakewood Pizzeria pipe character thin crust pizza, or something like that. So the geo modifier is going to be your location, and then judging by what type of business you are and how big your span is, you can have that be the biggest city around you. So it can be, I mean, if you have a specialty store and people come from miles around, you can use Denver in that possibly, or different pages for different geomods. And then if it's something more specialized, dentists, there tend to be a lot of dentists in each town. So you may even go down to zip code at that point, or neighborhood.
Kind of underscoring the theme that, hey, you want to be accurate and represent what you're doing. And Google's pretty smart, and there's some types of businesses, they know that you aren't realistically serving an entire state, you know, if you're like a dentist office or something like that, and you probably don't want to abuse stuff. That's, you know, that's a pretty good disclaimer. You should always put that. Don't abuse SEO, because it just doesn't end up good for you. You mentioned a couple different types of tags there. So, you know, we got the meta tag description, and it sounds like that's kind of a way to kind of talk about or share information about what you've written is about, maybe the purpose of the article or something like that. The page title, which is kind of one of the things people see first. And that's, you know, something you only have limited space to work with. Keep out those filler words. It seems like there's a lot of different types of metadata, really. Would you say those are like the most important ones there?
Let me actually bring up a screen, and I will share my screen, and I will go over those things really quickly.
Yeah,
okay.
your host, go ahead.
Thanks. All right, I have to find the screen where I am. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, so what are we looking at here for all the people who cannot see your screen?
Okay, so I pulled up just a simple Google search just for Denverdata Web, our company name, just to make it easy. Just to explain what each of these things is, and I'll describe them as I talk about them. You can see our GMB up here. That was our last one. I'm going to scroll down to a more, no, we'll just use this one here. I didn't want to use this top one necessarily, because it does have those extra page links at the top.
You're talking about
we'll
the top search result on the search results page.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm looking at. The search engine results page, the SERP, as we call it sometimes to shorten it. The top one here, we can see that we typed in Denverdata Web, it brought up the page. We can see this blue piece at the top that you can click on directly from the search engine results page is the title tag. That one here just simply says the name of our company, Denver Web Design, and then website development. So like I mentioned earlier, that has our company name, 2 major keywords about things we do, and then that geo modifier, which is Denver. Directly below that, there's a tiny little paragraph about what's on the page. So anyone who is using this can easily read at Denverdata Web. We create custom websites that help our clients succeed. Our custom website solutions make us the leading web development company in Denver. And that is very simple, very to the point. Anyone who reads that can tell that we are a company who provides those services, and then they can easily click in from there. So I hope I said it earlier. That's the meta description, is that short little paragraph. And then the meta title or the title tag is the clickable piece right above that. Another piece of metadata that is not, I don't think it's officially considered a piece of metadata, but it is used that way, is your URL or your web address. So here we just have our homepage, which is denverdata.com, but any other pages that we have showing on search engine results page, it'll show a slightly longer URL or the specific web address for that page. Website or Google will sometimes shorten those. You can see right below it, it tells us facebook.com, but then it doesn't give us the whole URL for our Facebook page. But at the same time, it does give a piece of information about what is on that page. So the URL, it's an unofficial piece of metadata for that page. Additionally, and these are considered pieces of metadata, and they don't factor directly into search engine results pages, but it does factor into how Google decides how to rank your page, is the H1s and H2s, which is the first header on the page and then the subheaders below that. And then H3s and H4s factor in as well. But if you can think about, if you go and visit any blog or any web page, you'll have those highlighted, bolded pieces of information that guide you through the article. Those are called H1s, H2s, headers in general. So those are also considered pieces of metadata as well.
That's the H1, H2. That's ultimately referring on a technical level, right, to like the HTML tags that produce those, right? So like in HTML terms, you're putting this HTML code in your website or the web page. The H1 HTML tag is what's going to be, that wraps around like the top header, the most important header, right? And then H2, H3 it's kind of a hierarchy, right? And then, you know, and so Google's treating those as potential pieces of metadata. And so, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but at Google's kind of, they can call an audible on those sorts of things. Like Google sees the metadata that you're presenting, and then Google essentially decide, what it's going to use, whether, like the page title, I hope is always the one it picks for that, right? But is the meta description always the one that it goes?
No, if you can, no.
Oh, bummer.
Most of the time, Google will take your crafted meta description as your search engine results page meta description. However, it can, mainly depending on the search term, it can take a different piece of your content or a different piece of really anything used for that page to create a meta description that more closely matches a searcher's query. So and you said bummer, which is interesting because it actually is a good thing. So
Yeah.
if you have, going back to my thin crust pizza example, if you have a page that focuses on thin crust pizza, I mentioned earlier, you don't want to get into the nitty gritty with the different toppings for thin crust pizza.
Right.
So if someone is searching maybe a longer tailed term, thin crust pizza, Denver, pepperoni, it may reject the search, the meta description that you have input and pull from your content to show the user that this page does mention pepperoni thin crust pizza in Denver. So when you see that, when that happens, that's when usually when you see a meta description that's kind of broken up and you see like a part of a sentence that has your term dot, and then a little bit more, that's Google working with the searcher's query and then also your page to show the best result possible.
Well, thanks, Google. We try our best to figure out what we think is going to work based on data analysis, but sometimes Google, it sounds like, really helps us get the rest of the way to really line it up with what people are looking for. So, Google's really, it's crunching huge, massive amounts of data and user activity every day, right? So, seeing the big picture when somebody's searching on a particular keyword, Google can probably see at a high level, like what's actually getting them to the result that people seem to appreciate more. Yeah. It's fascinating. Well, overall, like this is, I mean, it's clearly working with your metadata in a way that's really comprehensive. Um, has got to be a big part of digital strategy. You know, where do you see that? I mean, is that primarily SEO? What does that look like when you're incorporating this into your digital strategy?
So it is a huge part. In short, the better your metadata and the more descriptive and optimized your metadata is, the more organic traffic you're going to bring in. So that's the whole point of SEO, is search engine optimization. You're bringing in organic traffic.
Right.
Um, and for the most part, if you have optimized content on your site, it should, in theory, be enough. But if you're customizing your metadata to work in a way where you're grabbing the attention of the search engine users, you are going to, in the easiest way possible, bring in more visitors.
Yeah.
And when you're bringing in more visitors based on, when you're bringing in more visitors in comparison to how many people see it, you're increasing your click-through rate. So your click-through rate in general is the amount of impressions you get for that page on a search engine results page versus how many people click into it. So
Hmm.
click-through rate.
Makes sense.
We also call it a CTR. So when your CTR improves and gets higher and higher based on, in short, good metadata, you're also directly improving your SEO. So Google is going to see a site or a page with a higher CTR or click-through rate as a more optimized site. So it's going to improve your page rank, and it's actually a huge factor in improving your page rank. So if you're improving your it's kind of funny because people say, oh, metadata doesn't factor into SEO, and directly, not exactly, but very indirectly, yes. So if you're improving your CTR for your search engine results, if you're improving your metadata for your search engine results, you're going to improve your CTR, and then directly due to that, you will be improving your SEO.
I
And
get
then
you. Yeah.
in general, when you do that, you are performing keyword research to get there. And having those keywords and knowing what your searchers are looking for, that alone is going to help your overall strategy in general. So since you kind of have to do keyword research to write your metadata, you're then going to have those keywords to build out your content and to build out your offsite strategy and your ads and your social advertising and things like that. So
Hmm.
indirectly, in many, many different directions, this benefits all around.
Yeah. You know, it seems to me that SEO, it's really not just, you know, purely, hey, where do you rank? Your SEO is good if you rank high, SEO is bad if you don't rank as high. I mean, it's not that simple, right? I mean, there's a lot of different factors, you know, what you're trying to achieve out of it, and that sort of thing. Yeah, yeah, you look at the big picture, and metadata definitely fits in that, even if supposedly, you know, it's not directly impacting ranking, right? That's really what one of the big things I'm taking away from that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It directly no, but indirectly in every direction, yes. And that means something.
I mean, that being said, though, I mean, is this the kind of thing that, you know, non-technical people are really going to be able to work with? I mean, I suppose when we dive into it and you think about these things, they don't seem that complicated. You know, on the surface, you know, meta tags and metadata, it sounds technical. It sounds potentially daunting. I mean, is this something only SEO experts should be really thinking about and tinkering with?
Um, every website needs to be optimized. So no, I think everyone who is writing content or writing metadata or working with a website in general should be mindful of these things. And it's not, as I mentioned earlier, it is more or less common sense. So, I mean, you know what your page is about, you know, in general, what keywords people are looking for. And then there's some pretty simple tools, which we can talk about in a little bit, that can help you get to that conclusion more smoothly. Um, So every website should be optimized, and everyone who is working on that website has the ability to do so. So you're using words that people know, and you know what kind of customers you are looking to target, so you can write for them. So it sounds complicated, it sounds very technical, but in short, it's writing about your business and writing about your page. And it's, once you get past the barrier of how to find these keywords and how to write these things and how to implement them, it does become very streamlined and very overall helpful.
I mean, imagine it's got to be very useful, even like small, medium market businesses, mid-market, factoring that into their marketing, SEO strategies and things like that. I imagine it's got to be a still pretty important component, right?
Yes. I mean, something is better than nothing. And optimizing your site and improving your SEO is never going to hurt.
Sure.
And I'm not going to say it's necessarily something that a little goes a long way, because it is something that you do want to focus on a regular basis. But at the same time, anyone can put up a website. There's so many different platforms you can use to just put a website online.
Oh, right, yeah.
And
Wix, Google
and
Sites, all that stuff, right?
exactly, yeah. But as far as optimizing it, I mean, we've had people say things um, like all of our business comes from word of mouth, so SEO doesn't mean anything. And while that may be true now, it may also be that you haven't tried the SEO route. Everyone uses Google. And I mean, everyone, all ages, uses Google, uses Bing, uses some kind of search engine. If you have a smartphone or if you have a computer, you're using search engines to look for things. So optimizing your site and improving your SEO and doing so using metadata is the easiest way to, it's the first impression you make with a Google user. So if your metadata is optimized and people can see it from Google, that's never going to hurt your business. With the exception of making some of the mistakes we talked about earlier, it's only going to help. And even if it helps minimally and you make improvements over a longer period of time, there's nothing bad about that. So small businesses, medium businesses, big businesses, enterprise businesses, this is something every single business with a website should be focusing on.
Yeah, I hear that. And yeah, when we talk about like the impact, I mean, we talked a little about PageRank, we explored that. So, you know, my intuition is that, based on, what at least I know at a surface level of Google's algorithm and stuff, like it sounds like it's not something that's directly tied to that sort of thing as much as might have been in the past. What kind of impact we think some of these elements are having?
Like we mentioned earlier, though it is not a direct correlation, your content, let's get that straight, your content does have a direct correlation with your SEO and your page rank, but the meta descriptions and metadata directly, Google will never look at your handcrafted meta descriptions and say, oh yeah, page is exactly what we need to go to the top. But if your crafted meta description and title goes well along with the content that's on the page, and those things match with the search query, absolutely, that'll improve your page rank. And then in addition to that, like we mentioned earlier, if your meta descriptions are optimized and tell the Google user exactly what they're looking for, and more people are clicking into it, that improves your click-through rate. And a better click-through rate will always factor into page rank. It's one of the main things that factors into your page rank. So if you just say hypothetically you're on the third page and you want to be on the first page, optimize your content first, clean up your meta descriptions to say exactly what people are looking for. And then the more people are clicking through you on the third page and the better your content is, you are going to rise to the top very quickly. Or you are in a better position to rise to the top very quickly.
I mean, that's better than not being one. You know, yeah, I get it. You can't always guarantee these sorts of things. You really can't. But you know, you really want to make your own luck. You want to set the stage, right? You know, dot all your
Mhm.
dot all your T's, cross all your I's. No, that's not right. That's completely backwards. But I think that's pretty cool. You know,
Yeah.
I want to just kind of look at this stuff because it's really fascinating. I mean, a lot of what I've done in my career has been web development stuff, and always like thinking about how the code works. Why don't we just like take a look at what this we're actually working with it, right? I'm gonna pull up the website. You need to make me host, but you flip that back to me. You just right click on my name in the participants list.
Oh, that's how you do it. Okay, cool. Mm, don't know why it doesn't give me that option. I think you can share it now. Try it.
Cool. There we go. So let's pull this up. Here we go. So what we got here, this is an article on our website at denverdata.com. Article about metadata. So imagine that. So this is a really great article. And, you know, what does it look like behind the scenes? So when I do view source, so I actually kind of just opened these up real quick. So if you view the page source, when you right click on a web page in your browser, there's all this behind the scenes, right? So a lot of this seems so familiar to me when I look back on it. So we got all the HTML stuff here, pretty typical things. Um, the header stuff and links to documents like style sheets and things. For people who don't do web development, it may seem like a bunch of nonsense, but it's all information that your browser is using to build it. But a big piece of here is a whole huge section that has HTML tags that all start with meta. And so what, these are all meta tags, right? This is all metadata.
Yeah.
And here we go, the meta tag description. So it's meta, and then the name of this tag in here, this HTML element, is the description one. And there it says, what you mentioned earlier about that shows up in search results we have here. We share our best practices for understanding and writing meta descriptions and title tags. Learn about metadata here. So we've got a really great explanation, it seems, for what this article is. So we looked at an article on our website here about understanding metadata, and so this meta tag description, this description meta tag, it's basically outlining in really quickly and simple terms like what this article is about. So I can see like if that shows up in search results and somebody's looking for information about how to work with metadata and meta tags and things like that, they can get a really quick sense right away what that means and what this article is going to provide. And when we talk about click-through rate, I mean, that's a big thing, right? I mean, people being able to get a sense for, hey, this is what I'm looking for, they're more likely to click through, I would imagine.
Exactly. And like I mentioned earlier, we, instead of just copying a piece from the content and putting it in there, we told the Google user exactly what is there. We said, we're sharing our best practices for metadata. Whereas where I mentioned earlier, sometimes people copy and paste the first line of content. I realize you can't tell where I'm pointing right now. But, and while that may be useful to some people and may be used if someone's search query matches that sentence more accurately, our crafted meta description talks about what the article is about and why we're sharing it with the search engine user.
Right. Yeah, I get you. Right. Like, so the first line here in this article we're talking about metadata is like, it says, whenever you enter a search term into a search engine, you're presented with several different types of information. I mean, it's a great lead in to a discussion, like a topic that we're exploring, right? And so it's kind of leading that person into this discussion, kind of setting the stage. That's some great writing there. But, that doesn't necessarily, that first line, that first sentence doesn't necessarily describe the whole gist of the entire article and what you should take away from it. And I imagine if we led with that, it could be up for debate on some of these different, writing techniques, but having the kind of too long, didn't read kind of intro might be jarring. Maybe it's not the kind of way you want to present. So it sounds to me like the meta tag description utilization here really enables you to write the way you want to get the kind of experience you want with your reader, but also make sure when they're searching for it on a search result page, they can understand what it's about. And you make sure Google hopefully picks everyone. That's great. You give some options there.
Yeah. And then if you look down a little bit, you can see that the first line, the first few lines of the page are in there. Scroll up just a little bit more.
So in the source or the article itself?
Scroll up a little bit. You can see it's, hold on. I will tell you exactly what it's called. When it's actually under meta name Twitter description. So
Oh, these are like Open Graph and social media things, right? So
yeah.
they're grabbing information. So that's a good point. Like, so social media has metadata too, that when Facebook is connected and Twitter is connected, right?
Yeah, and then there's also the description content, which that piece of information there may be used if we didn't have a crafted piece of meta. I'm actually not sure exactly what that is. It's pretty fascinating though to see that. But you can see a few of those things, just use the first few lines of content.
Mhm.
But then on the same concept, if you can go back to the article real quick, David.
So we're gonna look at the article, right?
If someone is searching something more specific, scroll down a little bit so I can see some of the H tags.
These are one, right?
Yeah, so if someone searches the term exactly, how does metadata affect SEO, or does metadata directly affect SEO? I use those terms and those FAQ type things within the article. So if someone is searching those things exactly, it may pull pieces of the content into the meta description so that people can see more clearly exactly what they're looking for. So while our crafted meta description does give the overall picture of what it's about, Google does have the opportunity, like I mentioned earlier, to pull different pieces of things we've written into search results in order to give someone a more accurate representation of what's on the page based on their search query.
Seems like a great approach. I mean, what you've done here, what we're looking at is, essentially you're breaking up the article with scannable subheaders, things like, you got some paragraphs here, some really useful information, breaking down how metadata affects SEO is a subheader here. That's one of those H3 tags, that sort of thing, right? And, below that, some little bit information there. Then the next subheader is using keywords and metadata. And so I see what you've done. I mean, that seems like a great writing technique, but also SEO technique to make the document more scannable and know what they're looking at when they're reading it, but also given the possibility that content is injected in search results as metadata and potential keywords and things. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So anyone reading this who's looking for a specific piece of information can more easily find it. But yeah, at the same time, Google can more easily find those different pieces of information in our content and then use it appropriately.
So I pulled up kind of like the back end thing for websites. So we use a content management system called Drupal, and a content management system, for those who aren't familiar with that, and it's really kind of a web software-based system that allows you to manage your content, databases and user interfaces, so you don't have to be constantly editing HTML files and things like that. This is really how the vast majority of websites are managed nowadays, and have been for some time. And we use one called Drupal, which is a great platform, open source, has a lot of capabilities. But digging in here in the interface and how we manage this, we got a couple really neat tools and things we can use here. And so specifically for managing our metadata. So I noticed, yeah, we're using a real-time SEO tool, which I realize that's using Yoast, which I want to talk about that in a moment too, because I want to come back to that. But I can see here that we're able to manage our metadata inside of the user interface for this. So, back in the day working with HTML, yeah, like all those HTML tags and meta tags we're looking at in the source there. When we looked at that, that would all have to be done by hand, but, using this content management system, we have these fields for each of these pages, and we can kind of identify, hey, for my page title, this is what I want that to be showing up as, for the description, this is one I want to read. And after we talked about it, it really drives home the fact that, if we don't want Google to just by default potentially just picking the first line of the page, well, let's specify that there. This actually makes it really easy to manage this stuff, it, it sounds technical on the surface, but after understanding, what the purpose of these metadata and tags are for, and having tools like a CMS like this, it's not that bad.
No, and I've said it a few times now, and I will probably say it forever. SEO is in this simplest terms, it's common sense. So these things are they're easily understandable, they're easily searchable, and they're easily readable, not only by Google, but by search engine users. So absolutely, once you get to this point and kind of get past the frustrating part of maybe getting these things onto your website in a way that can be usable, when they're finally there and you get past that part, having it there and having this process be very easy and simple and to the point it's invaluable.
Clearly, yeah. That's a big deal. Well, I did mention Yoast. I've worked with that tool for a while, and every now and then I see it pop up on my radar. I'm using it. I know that we have that tool, looks like, and we're using it. There are a lot of great tools out there, right? For SEO in general. I know that this one, it's nice having somebody's, we're using like a module in here to incorporate how some of it works, and it gives extra insights in SEO and make sure we're doing things we need to, with these metadata description and stuff. It's green lighting us here. I can see that it has a focus keyword that's say, hey, good job, like, help make sure we hit some of these important pieces, I imagine. So that's nice having some of those tools. And I know, like, we have a capability to use this type of tool in the Drupal platform, and WordPress is another popular platform, and it can work in there too. So that seems pretty handy. I know we were talking a little bit before we jumped in here about Search Console. Is that something we can bring up too? Because that actually shows like data like straight from like Google, right?
Yeah, and I actually have it open, so I will steal the screen back from you.
Hey, Google's got like Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager and lots of different tools, but Google Search Console, this one's really fun. I mean, this is, correct me if
It's
I'm wrong,
great.
but this is showing information like straight from like how your stuff is acting on search results pages and that sort of thing.
Yeah. When I first used this, it was a few years ago, several years ago now, but I remember saying, this is like spying. And it kind of feels like you are spying on the search engine users, but in the best way possible.
Yeah.
So we can look here and we can see, let's make this a little bit longer. Let's do 25. So many of these things are focused on the same thing. Let's scroll down a little bit more.
So what are we looking at right here when we open this
So
Google Search Console page?
these are search terms that have been used that people find our site by using. So actual terms that people have searched and then ended up on our site, exactly. So I'm trying to find ones that aren't focused on WordPress. I'm trying to find some more like general terms. Let's just flip that up and upside down. So this is kind of interesting to see because this is very useful for our strategy. We can see that the term Denver SEO, which is a huge keyword that we would like to place for, in the last 3 months, we can see directly that our average position for that keyword is the 42nd position, meaning it's on the 4th page. So obviously that's something that we, seeing this, would like to improve. And then at the same time, the page has been seen for that exact search term on Google almost 8,000 times. It's had 8,000 impressions in the last 3 months, but we can see that it hasn't yet been clicked on for this exact term. And I know I keep saying that, and it's very important because it's when people are searching these terms, we're seeing what they're searching, what we're showing up for, where we're showing up. So it not only gives us really great keyword examples of things people are actually searching for, but it shows us areas that we need to improve as well. So it's fascinating, and it almost gives us the exact insight that we need for so many pieces of SEO.
And CTR, it's one of those terms you use. I see that showing up in this display, this report. It's showing the click-through rate, and we just talked about that. So, I mean, it seems to me that this could really be used to figure out ways to tweak a little bit, like some of how your articles and things that are showing up in search results. Perhaps adjusting those description tags and things like that to see how they could, you know, get a higher click-through rate, right? Maybe make an adjustment to it. If the way it currently is now isn't really getting the job done in a way that's desired, then making some adjustments to it and then tracking that over time, I imagine, right? See what happens after you make those changes.
Yes. So I mentioned earlier, CTR it directly affects your page rank. So where we can see that a lot of these WordPress queries, we do have a very, very good CTR. You can also see marketing agencies near me. That's a term that we have been using, especially for PPC, regularly. And we can see that, and I don't think we were replacing for this term at all a few weeks ago, but we can see that we do have one impression for it in position 1 and also 1 click. So because the number of impressions and the number of clicks are equal, we've been clicked on for every impression we've had for that term, the CTR is 100. So if that's something that we want to continue optimizing for, we're in a very good position to do so. Even though we don't have a whole lot of traction for it yet, the CTR for that term is perfect. In the same realm, let's scroll down a little bit. Really, a CTR in the double digits in general is fantastic. So let's go down a little bit more to see some of these other terms that we maybe want to optimize for just a little bit more. I'm seeing so many of these WordPress terms. Denver Web. Let's look at that one. So that's not our name exactly, but it is something. We're in Denver and we work with web terms or web services. Mm-hmm. So we can see that we're in an average of position 2 for that. We only have just under 500 impressions, but the CTR for that page can be improved. So if that's a term that we want to work towards, and I feel like I'm kind of going around in circles with this, so I'm not going to talk about it too much more, but in general, yeah, it gives you a very good representation of terms that you're trying to place for, terms that you are placing for, and then also areas of improvement and everything in between.
Well, that's pretty cool. I would definitely want to look into that tool more, even on my own, because the data there is really compelling, and it's clearly kind of like a lighthouse. It's pointing to, here's the things you want to work on. Here's the things that are working really well, and what gets measured gets improved. That's something I see a lot. We're all about data, and so this is some of the best piece of data here. That's great stuff. Thanks for showing that. Well, we're almost about the end of our hour here. I really enjoyed diving into metadata. I tend to geek out on stuff like that, I have to admit, some of the technical things, because I have my web development background and diving into those sorts of details, but it's not really so technical. When I think back, what we kind of covered in such a short period of time, it doesn't really seem as technical as it looks. And even if it doesn't have a direct, huge impact on maybe ranking and things, it's clearly to me working with your metadata is an important part of your overall SEO strategy. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about your business. So, everyone who has a business talks about on a regular basis. They like talking about their business. So when you're talking about your business or telling other people about your business, you're already having those pieces of information you need to use to write your metadata, with the exception of optimizing it for search trends and things like that. So there's really no downside to it. I mean, if you own a business or if you work with a business, you already have most of what you need to write this. And that's why I'm hesitant to say that it doesn't directly affect your SEO, because it directly affects your communication with search engine users. And it's your first impression you can make with a person searching. So for that reason, like I mentioned earlier, there's really no downside in optimizing this and in using this as a marketing tool.
That's a great point. I mean, I think that's something everybody, like including myself, bears remembering, that SEO is more than just your ranking in Google search results pages or wherever. It's really about optimizing your communication with your potential customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be people that are going to be searching for these things, and if your SEO is just focusing on like optimizing ranking to the nth degree in very technical fashion, the communication may not be where it needs to be. And ultimately, if somebody feels like you're not actually speaking to them through this venue, it's not going to work, right?
I mean, if your metadata is super optimized but doesn't really tell the customer what they need to know, then yeah, that's not the best strategy either. So you do want to have a mix of both. Communicating with your potential customer, communicating with the Google user, communicating with Google, and then also using the terms that people are searching for. So all these things work together. And yeah, it's a big part of SEO, huge part, even though it's not technically directly related. I like to say it is.
Good enough for me.
Cool.
Well, I think that's a good place to cap off this week. Thanks so much for everybody tuning in to our weekly digital strategy chat. We're going to be doing this every week, every Friday, same times. That's 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Be sure to check on our website for resources related to this topic. You saw that blog post there that we had, but also check out on the YouTube channel, on social media, LinkedIn and Facebook, for additional resources, guides, and just overall discussions on digital strategy. Thanks, and see you next week.
Good weekend.